This is Inside Indiana Business Radio for the afternoon of Friday, March 15th, 2024. I'm Kate Sharon. West Lafayette is encouraging residents to rent their extra bedrooms to Purdue University students in an effort to curb the city's major housing shortage while the student population grows. The City Council unanimously passed a resolution meant to increase the awareness of a city owner-occupied rental program. In turn, City Council members said they hope homeowners offer long-term leases to students while Purdue builds more units. Councilmember Layla Vitamanis.
Obviously, efforts by the university and the city are very good to attract new developers and new residence halls, but this will take several years before, obviously it actually becomes built. This is why, we just decided to put every option on the table to increase housing capacity.
Housing in the city is sparse, with the rental unit vacancy capacity hanging at 1%, the resolution read. According to census data, the national average is around 6.6%. In February, the council issued a call to action resolution to spur Purdue to address the city's housing shortage and affordability crisis, exacerbated by the university's growing student population. USA Today recently celebrated its 2024 Women of the Year, naming one inspirational woman from each state. And Indiana's honoree is a mom who turned her grief into action. Each month, 24,000 naloxone doses are prepped by Overdose Lifeline, the not-for-profit founded by Justin Phillips. The doses are sent all over the state, stocking boxes and vending machines to make it as easy to get as possible. Overdose Lifeline has created several other prevention programs. The latest is for babies. The organization recently opened Heart Rock, a recovery house in Indianapolis for pregnant women and moms with substance abuse disorders. The organization also created Camp Mariposa, a year-round camp experience for kids and teens who have a family member with a substance abuse disorder. The founder of an Arizona-based real estate company whose holdings include more than a dozen retail centers in central and northern Indiana has been arrested on 2 federal fraud charges related to an alleged $77 million stock manipulation scheme. Indiana native Jonathan Mahoynan Larimore, 51, who now lives in Punta Gorda, Florida, has been charged with 1 count of tender offer fraud and 1 count of securities fraud related to what investigators say was a scheme to artificially inflate the stock price of New York City-based co-working space company WeWork Incorporated. Larimore, an Indiana University graduate who grew up in Fort Wayne, made his initial court appearance on the charges Thursday morning in Fort Myers, Florida, and was released on an unsecured $3 million bond, court documents show. From the #1 source for Indiana business news, this is Inside Indiana Business Radio.
Southwest Indiana, your bold future starts here. IBJ Media, Inside Indiana Business, and the IEDC invite you to the 3rd annual Engage Southwest Indiana, April 12th in Evansville, presented by CareSource, Indiana University, and Old National Bank. Connect with fellow business and community leaders, discover programs aligned to your region's unique needs, and walk away with bold new thinking for Southwest Indiana's future growth. RSVP now at ibj.com/engage.
In light of a new report finding Indiana's housing affordability worsened over the last year, a group of advocates on Thursday called on Governor Eric Holcomb to establish a dedicated task force, saying lawmakers haven't done enough to solve the state's housing crisis. IIB's Alex Brown has more.
An analysis from Prosperity Indiana and the National Low Income Housing Coalition found that the Hoosier State now ranks slightly below the national average for its affordable housing supply. In terms of the housing cost burden for extremely low-income renter households, Indiana is now 10th worst in the nation. In response, the Hoosier Housing Needs Coalition called on Holcomb to establish a task force in the vein of his Public Health Commission, which advanced a significant measure to increase state funding for local public health efforts. The group acknowledged efforts by Holcomb in the past, including a veto on a controversial measure and support during the COVID-19 pandemic, but said more work was needed. Roughly 210,000 Hoosiers qualify as extremely low income, meaning their incomes fall below the poverty level or below 30% of their area median income, whichever is greater. But that group, which grew from the 2023 report, only has access to 70,000 affordable and available housing units, a decrease from the previous year. For every 100 low-income households, there are roughly 34 units available. Additionally, 76% of these families are severely house cost burdened. In response, Holcomb highlighted recent legislative efforts and noted that roughly 1/3 of requests for state-ready funding were housing-related. Alex Brown, Inside Indiana Business Radio.
Small meat processors can apply for low-interest loans through a program meant to assist them with capital expansion projects. The Indiana State Department of Agriculture has $15 million worth of loans in the Indiana Meat and Poultry Intermediary Lending Program to hand out. The program was created to support local livestock producers and reduce processing delays. The state said in a release that it can create jobs and add tax revenues for local communities. New York-based Liberation Labs has selected a site director for its biomanufacturing plant currently under construction in Richmond. Reese Dale, a native of East Central Indiana, returns to the state after serving as director of process engineering and manufacturing at Amyris, a biotechnology company headquartered in Emeryville, California. Liberation Labs said in a news release this week that Dale has more than 20 years of experience in developing and operating biomanufacturing facilities and biorefineries around the world. The company's $115 million plant, when operational, will produce alternative proteins, which are used in food products such as almond milk and plant-based meat, as well as agricultural products such as biopesticides. Consumers became slightly less optimistic about the economy this month, though they continued to expect inflation to cool further, a potential sign that price increases will keep slowing. The University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index, released Friday in a preliminary version, slipped to 76.5 in March, barely below February's figure of 76.9. Americans' outlook has essentially remained fixed since January, when it leapt higher. Sentiment is now about halfway between its all-time low, reached in June 2022 when inflation peaked, and its pre-pandemic averages. Americans' outlook on the economy will likely have a significant effect on the presidential race, which will likely focus heavily on perceptions of President Joe Biden's economic record. Dan Hassler, former Indiana Commerce Secretary and Eli Lilly and Company executive, is this week's guest on the Business and Beyond podcast with Gary Dick, presented by PNC, a weekly conversation with high-profile Hoosiers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond, available now from your favorite podcast provider. I'm Kate Sharon for Inside Indiana Business, radio on demand.